is the Sunday of Orthodoxy. We have celebrated today, the first Sunday in Lent, as the Sunday of Orthodoxy since the triumph of Orthodoxy in 843. So this is a 1,000-year-old, 1,100-year-old feast, which we still keep. The triumph of Orthodoxy, amazing. Of course, the church itself is 2,000 years old, so the oldest organization in the history of the world. And there won't be any other that old. The original triumph of Orthodoxy was the triumph over iconoclasm. And you know, it's kind of odd because we don't really know how iconoclasm arose. It wasn't a problem for many centuries there. And in fact, we know from ruins in eastern Syria, a place called Dura Europa, there's a house church from the early 3rd century with frescoes, Bible scenes, images of our Lord. There's also a synagogue in Dura Europa with frescoes also. So obviously in the 3rd century, even the Christians and the Jews had no problem with icons, no problems with depicting the saints and images. They didn't consider it idolatry. They didn't consider it a violation of the 2nd commandment. Thou shalt make no graven images. Jews and Christians. It didn't become a problem for Christians until the Muslim age. Muslims were iconoclasts. They did not believe that God could come as man, and therefore they did not believe that God could be depicted as a human being. This became a problem when Justinian II actually issued gold coins, not with his own image, but with the image of Christ on them. And the Caliph of Baghdad was outraged. He says, we cannot be circulating these gold coins, which they had been using before, with an icon of Christ. And so he issued his own coins, and he made his own people use his coins, which just had Arabic script on them. And that caused a bit of a problem for the traders, the merchants, who either lived in the Muslim area or lived close to the Muslim area, because then they had this whole problem of currency exchange. They were probably losing money. So it may have been the bankers and the businessmen who, because they were losing money, decided, well, maybe icons were not such a good thing. We don't know that. That's just an idea. It does sort of happen that way in the world. But we do know that iconoclasm among Christians arose in the eastern part of the empire, which part of it was came under Muslim rule, or were close to Muslim rule and greatly influenced by them. In fact, it becomes policy under Leo III, who is also known as Leo the Isaurian. Isauria was a region now part of eastern Turkey. That's where he grew up, that's where affinities were, and he tended to be rather pro-Muslim. In fact, he was also called Leo the Saracen-minded. Saracen meaning Easterner, but also Muslim. One thing he did is he prohibited the taking of interest on loans. That was a Muslim thing. The Byzantines had no problem with it. Clergy couldn't do it, but the Byzantines themselves could lend money at interest. The other thing he did was to start removing icons from churches, defiling them, covering them over. And he preached sermons against the icon, accusing the iconodules, which is what we are, versus the iconoclast. And iconoclast means the smashers of icons. He preached that the iconodules were, in fact, violating the 2nd commandment. Thou shalt not make any graven images. The pious were outraged by this. Fortunately, Leo didn't live forever, and his successors were overthrown. In 787, the church held another council, the 7th ecumenical council, the last ecumenical council, and decided 2 things in defense of icons. First thing, they distinguished between worship and veneration, which we do today, worship, veneration. Greek word for worship is latria, which is where we get the word idolatry, the worshiping idols. The Greek word for veneration is proskinesis, and that's what we call the bow we do. You make the sign of the cross and you bow. That's a proskinesis. We'll use that term. You'll hear that term. You'll say, oh, do a proskinesis. They mean make the sign of the cross and bow. It's a humble way of just honoring something, a person or a thing that is worthy of honor. You're humbling yourself by bowing to them. No problem with that. But latria, worship, that's something only for God. This is what the council said, only for God. So that's what we do. We worship God, but we venerate icons and lots of other things, people as well. And the second thing the council decided was, well, the reason we can do this, it is good and right, we ought to do is make icons of our Lord. Why? Because he did come in the flesh. He became man. He didn't just come appearing as man, he actually became man with flesh and bones. And he walked among us. It's a historical fact, which of course the Muslims deny, as God and man. And he gave of his flesh and bone. He died for us and was resurrected as flesh and bone as well. And there are some people who don't quite believe that. But no, he was resurrected in flesh and bone. And what he proves in that is that we too can do that. He's combined God and man in one person, and by adoption we can do the same. We can be human beings, but also be divine by following his example. That's the lesson of the Sunday of Orthodoxy. Thank you.